Welcome back. In the previous sessions, we have discussed about stored procedures as well as functions and the creation of the schema that we have for stored procedures as well as functions. You might felt they look similar, but there are huge differences between stored procedures and functions which we have to learn before we continue using the functions or stored procedures in our regular use cases. And you have to also know when you need to create a function and when you need to create a stored procedure as well. So let's come to this session and let's continue having those discussions in this session. So I try to capture as much as information in this particular slide, and it's more theoretical, but it will be very interesting information as well. So return value. So in case of function, it must return a single return value, and functions are designed to return a single value or a result set. In case of stored procedures, it does not necessarily return a value, although it can return a result set or output parameters. Procedures are primarily used for executing series of SQL statements or tasks without necessarily returning a value. Functions can be directly used in SQL queries like any other expression, but when you use the stored procedures, you have to use call statement. I mean to say they are invoked using the call statement, but they cannot be directly used in the SQL statements. Functions can be invoked in line with SQL statements and expressions. They are typically used within select, where, or other SQL statements. But in case of stored procedures, must be explicitly called using call statement or invoked from another stored procedure or a function. They can be used directly within the SQL statements. They cannot be used directly within the SQL statements. So functions cannot modify the database state or perform transactions. They are read-only by default. So, but stored procedures can modify the database state, perform transactions, and include control of flow. They are not limited to read-only operations. Functions limited control flow constructs such as if statements, case statements, and loops. They are primarily used for computations or data transformations. But stored procedures supports more complex control flow constructs like loops, conditional statements, and execution handling. They are more used for implementing business logic or complex database operations. Functions are more portable across different database systems as they adhere to the standard SQL syntax. Whereas stored procedures may have a limited portability as the syntax and features can vary between different database systems. Functions requires appropriate privileges to execute and access underlying tables or data. Whereas stored procedures requires appropriate privileges to execute and perform actions within the database. Users must have execute privileges to call the stored procedures. These are very basic differences between functions and stored procedures. But in a summary, when you have a reusable logic that you want to build within the database, then it's better to go for functions. When you have series of SQL queries that you want to execute or you want to build a transaction based implementation, it's better to go for stored procedures. With that said, we'll wrap up here and continue on the next session in the next video. Thank you for watching.